Hoo-wee, talk about facing fear till it don't scare you no more. Precisely. And this, my friends, is highly relevant to those of us who do not live in the 41st or 42nd millennium. For in this fear conditioning, we see an echo of one of the most powerful tools in modern psychology. Greetings, brave travelers. It is I, the Wizard Inquisitor. I come to you via astral projection cast directly into your consciousness. In the darkest reaches of the galaxy, there exists a breed of warriors who walk unflinching through fire and death. They do not tremble, they do not falter, and above all, they know no fear.
There can only be one legendary order you speak of, the Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's Space Marines.
Hoo-wee, I get chills just thinking about the stoic presence of those warrior monks. Are there any other factions that are both as awe-inspiring and terrifying as the Emperor's Angels of Death?
Indeed, my friends. The Space Marines are a physical embodiment of the willpower and might of the Emperor of mankind. And as the Emperor himself once proclaimed, "They shall be my finest warriors. They are my Space Marines, and they shall know no fear." But what does it mean to know no fear? And more importantly, what can we learn from it when it comes to our own anxieties? Today, brave heroes, we delve into the psychology of the Adeptus Astartes and the extraordinary conditioning that sculpts a Space Marine into the iron-willed juggernaut of the Imperium. We explore this not merely as a curiosity, but as a lesson. For we who are mortal can glean much wisdom from the fearlessness of the Emperor's angels.
An intriguing promise indeed. Tell us how the minds of these warriors are crafted.
You see, the fearlessness of the Adeptus Astartes is no idle boast. It is the result of a meticulously engineered transformation that is equal parts mental, physical, and spiritual. Space Marines are not born, they are reforged.
And by reforged, you mean surgically carved apart, rebuilt with organs that don't belong in any biology textbook, and then mind-wiped till they worship the Codex like it's gospel?
Exactly so. Their conditioning is multifaceted, equal parts science and sacrament. And the purpose? To eradicate fear. Or rather, to reframe it. Let us examine the methods. First is the chemical conditioning. After they are chosen as adolescents, these neophytes are subjected to chemical regimens designed to suppress the fear response and amplify aggression. These aren't just stimulants. They're psychoactive compounds that dull terror at the neural level. Even their power armor is laced with auto-injectors to deploy calming agents or berserker enhancers in the heat of combat.
Jeez, so they got built-in benzos. Ain't no Xanax on Terra that'll do that.
But chemical enhancement is only part of the picture. A grueling process of hypnotic indoctrination achieves cognitive changes that fortify the mind. This is accomplished using the hypnomat. Picture a device that lulls the recruit into trance and floods his mind with light, sound, and suggestion. Skills, tactics, survival instincts, all uploaded like data into a cogitator. But more than that, his very personality is rewritten. Aggression is sharpened. Fear is dulled. And emotional ties? If they are not useful, they are deleted.
So the memories of who they were before, and the fears they once had, faded, perhaps forgotten.
Indeed. The hypnomat doesn't merely teach, it transforms. Recruits emerge not as men with memories, but as weapons with programming. But the process does not end there. Recruits are then subjected to brutal experiential combat training, for there is no replacement for real pain, real pressure, or real blood. Space Marines are tempered in crucibles of lethal combat drills, live fire exercises, and survival trials that would break even veteran Imperial Guard soldiers. And all this before they even see a battlefield. This repeated exposure acts as a form of psychological inoculation. Like a vaccine for terror, it teaches the mind that fear is not a master, but a messenger.
Hoo-wee, talk about facing fear till it don't scare you no more.
Precisely. The response to fear is rehearsed until automatic. A Space Marine may feel a pang of dread, but it is overridden by training, purpose, and reflex. As some scholars of the Codex Astartes note, they do not lack fear entirely, they simply do not obey it. And this, my friends, is highly relevant to those of us who do not live in the 41st or 42nd millennium. For in this fear conditioning, we see an echo of one of the most powerful tools in modern psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Oh yes, that's the human science that says it ain't the monster that's the problem. It's how you think about the monster, right?
Well said, Living Tome. At its core, CBT teaches us that the interpretation of our feelings is more powerful than the feelings themselves. Anxiety, for example, is not inherently damaging. In fact, it is an irreplaceable part of the human mind. The purpose of anxiety in the human brain is to keep us safe. That is why we evolved the ability to feel fear in the first place. Imagine the primordial human living in a cave. In those times, the threat of being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger was very real. Hence, anxiety evolved in the mind as a way to alert us to these potential dangers. It identifies a rustling in the bushes as a potential predator waiting to pounce, so that we can take appropriate action to keep ourselves safe. This is where the term fight or flight comes from. Our anxiety alerts us to a threat, so we can respond by either running away or preparing for battle. However, a problem arises when our mind's interpretation of the anxiety signal is not an accurate reflection of reality. For indeed, while a rustling in the bushes might mean a big cat is watching you with hungry eyes, the actual explanation might simply be a squirrel. And if our ancestors chose to turn and run every time they were alerted to a shaking bush, they would have starved to death from their inability to forage for food without being paralyzed by fear. Hence, what causes us suffering is not the anxiety itself. It is our belief that anxiety always means disaster. Or worse still, it is the belief that anything which provokes our anxiety must be avoided. For every time we avoid a feared situation, a nefarious feedback loop is activated within our minds. For the act of avoidance itself tells our brain that the thing we fear is worthy of being avoided. So the next time we encounter it, our brain dials up the anxiety response to 11, so that our urge to avoid is even stronger. And so the loop continues. Stronger fear, leading to stronger avoidance, leading to even more fear. This is called the cycle of avoidance, and it is a plague of the mind for many mortals.
Ah, but this is not what happens to a space marine, is it? Surely the Emperor's angels of death do not become trapped in the cycle of avoidance.
You are correct, my feathered friend. For a Space Marine does not view anxiety as a command. He views it as a signal. To an Astartes, fear is simply data, not a directive. Instead of, I am afraid, so I must flee, the mind of a Space Marine says, I recognize this signal. It alerts me to the threat of heretics and traitors, and I will respond with discipline, strength, and the fury of the Emperor.
Hoo-wee, that's like taking anxiety and saying, thanks for the heads up, but I got this handled. Except Space Marines do it with a galactic-sized dose of super steroids.
Quite right, my leather-bound friend. But while the chemical conditioning and physical transformation of the Astartes certainly make practicing this cognitive skill easier, This aspect of their psychological conditioning is an integral part of the Space Marine mind. In the real world, this is known as cognitive restructuring, a core CBT technique. It is the same skill we practice when we reframe a fearful thought into a more accurate and helpful one. Suppose you feel anxious about a job interview. In response, your mind tells you, "We feel anxious. This means there is a threat to us, which means I'm going to fail this interview." So your anxiety worsens, and if it gets bad enough, you might even cancel the interview entirely. But CBT helps us interpret our anxiety differently. It says, challenge that thought. This adrenaline I feel? It's my body preparing me to perform. And I have no idea if I will succeed. But if I don't even try, I will guarantee my failure. Just as the Space Marine stares down a tyrannid horde and says, "This is not doom I feel. This is duty."
But the internal dialogue of the mind is not the only way the Astartes conquer fear. Their action in the face of fear is equally as important, isn't it?
Absolutely. In this way, Space Marines demonstrate another fundamental CBT strategy: exposure therapy. The deliberate confrontation of our fear in controlled doses so that we can teach our brain that our fear is not always what it might seem.
Well, geez, things must get pretty hardcore when the Astartes start exposing themselves.
You might want to check your phrasing on that one.
Yes, the Astartes, of course, take exposure therapy to mythic proportions. As we discussed earlier, recruits face potentially lethal trials so that fear itself becomes mundane. They harden their will through pain and blood. And every time the Space Marine sets foot on the battlefield and chooses to charge headfirst into enemy lines, it reinforces their learned control of fear. We can adopt this approach in our own lives, but in a much gentler way. Afraid of public speaking? Start with reading aloud to a mirror, and then to a friend, then to a group of friends. Keep challenging yourself step by step until the fear of speaking to a crowd lessens. Or perhaps you are fearful of a needed confrontation with a problematic colleague, so you avoid having the conversation entirely. Instead, try practicing the discussion in your mind first. Then, try role-playing it with someone you trust. This will make the real encounter seem less daunting. This is exposure therapy in a nutshell. You start small by intentionally experiencing a minute semblance of what you are afraid of, and you slowly but surely increase the level of exposure until your anxiety lessens. In fact, this is also how we break the cycle of avoidance. Rather than indulging our brain's urge to avoid the thing that it identifies as a potential threat, we do the opposite. We face the feared situation intentionally and allow ourselves to experience the anxiety fully. By doing so, we teach our brain that we can face the fear without anything bad happening. Or, even if something bad does happen, we show our mind that we can handle it. Hence, through repeated and intentional exposure, our brain learns that what it thought was a threat to our existence is not actually threatening at all. And in doing so, our brain turns down the anxiety response every time we face the fear. In this way, exposure therapy is the opposite of the avoidance cycle. Where each act of avoidance worsens our anxiety, each act of exposure lessens it.
Well, that makes perfect sense. If you pet the scary groks every day, it eventually stops being so scary. So even though we mortals might lack power armor and fear-suppressing chemical implants, the psychology of a Space Marine's fearlessness is still within our grasp.
Exactly. While it is true that Space Marines are unimaginably different from humans of the real world, and even though their incredible violence and fanatic indoctrination as servants of a hyper-fascist and xenophobic empire are not qualities to be admired, we can still learn something from the psychology of these angels of war. The next time you feel anxiety, pause, listen, and reinterpret. Do what the Astartes do when they treat fear as data. Say not, this fear means danger, but rather, this fear means readiness. It means I care. It means I can be strong. Or when your mind tells you we must avoid the thing we fear, instead say, thank you for the warning, but I can assure you, my loyal brain, we can handle this. By reframing, you remove fear's teeth. It becomes a greeting, not a stop sign.
So behind the wrath of the angels of death lies a hopeful strength we can aspire to. Right. Maybe leave the genocidal tendencies aside, but embrace the power of living your life despite your fear.
Exactly. For remember this, even the mighty Space Marines do feel fear. They simply do not bow to it. Their strength lies not in being without fear, but in interpreting fear as fuel for action. And that is a truth even a mortal can live by. Yes, brave heroes, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But in our world, fear is not an enemy to be slain. It is a helpful companion that sometimes gets out of control, but can also be tamed. And through the lens of a Space Marine's training, we may come to see our own anxieties as stepping stones. So rise, my friends, fear not the path, for courage is forged, not gifted.
And remember, y'all, there ain't no shame in being scared. You just don't have to let it control your life. Yes, you can take your fear by the hand and show it how to walk a different path.
Well said, my friends. For now, brave heroes, may your mind be focused, your will unshaken, and your fears faced with the fury of a Space Marine. If this message of arcane wisdom has stirred your spirit, I beseech thee, strike the like button as though it were a goblin skull, and consider subscribing to this channel so that our paths may cross again.